Well, this is bigger than what the sheriff had been asked to do before. It wasn't, get the guy off this land, I want to buy it, cheap. Suddenly this is huge. And the sheriff said, okay, I'll do it. But I'm starting to hear that money is being collected, private and personal, to, in essence, bring this man to trial. So money had actually been collected out of the state of Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa. And Joseph Reynolds says, you gather all that money, and you, when I bring Joseph into any town in Missouri, you give me all the money and I'll be a rich man. And Boggs says, I will begin today to gather the money. In other words, you kidnap Joseph, you come back then a very rich man. But the sheriff says, well, that's not all. The sheriff says, I want to be governor of this state myself. And he now says, okay, you get all these people we've talked about, everybody wants to be governor. You're like, what? Okay. So the sheriff then says, what I want is I want all your political machinery put behind me, so that when I bring Joseph into the state of Missouri, I want money, and I want to be the next governor of this state. Boggs says, you get me Joseph Smith, you are the next governor, and you are a rich man. Well, okay, Sheriff Reynolds, does he want to split the money with anybody? No. So he's very quiet. He crosses the state. It's like, it's like any of us, tourists, doesn't make any waves. He just kind of moves across the state. He gets a boat and goes across the Mississippi River, and he works his way up towards Nauvoo, and he stops in a little town called Carthage. Now, Carthage is the county seat of Hancock County. Now, mind you, Nauvoo is the biggest town, but Carthage is the county seat. When the sheriff arrives in Carthage, he begins to learn things about Joseph that Boggs hadn't told him. In other words, did I not tell you that this man has 40 bodyguards that guard his personage night and day? There's a surprise. And did I not tell you that Joseph Smith has, remember how every county kind of had like little citizen soldiers in town? That Joseph can call on 5,000 men in an organization called the Nauvoo Legion to protect him. And that Joseph now leads us. And at the same time in the United States, how big was our army? 8,500 men. And so you look and you say, hey, Joseph, are you protected? What would you say? He no longer has to flip over those covered wagons, like in Far West and form some kind of wall. In essence, he has enough men that would be willing to give their lives for his, that, he doesn't need it. And so all of a sudden, here's your lone man, Sheriff Reynolds. What are his chances? 0. Okay, we all agree. His chances look pretty bad. What are your odds on something like this? So finally, Sheriff Reynolds concludes, I need somebody else. And so he goes to the sheriff in Carthage, and he says to the sheriff in Carthage, will you help me kidnap this man? And the sheriff says, well, what's in it for me? Well, he doesn't want to be governor of another state, but he says, I'll take half the money. And Reynolds says, you've got it. Now, the sheriff of Carthage has known the Mormons long enough that he says we need to work our way into town. And how we're going to do it, we're going to disguise ourselves as Mormon missionaries. Now, you realize the disguise today you can't miss. The white shirt tattered, okay, red tie went down, some kind of, little badge, bike. But you'd say back then, when you're a missionary, how did you prove you're a missionary? You didn't cuss. So I would imagine for these two idiots, they've got to practice. Okay, how we doing? How we doing? Everybody's a farmer. Okay. All right, so they come up with it. They've got kind of the language down. They've got the word baptism. They've got the word missionary. They've got elders. And they now come into Nauvoo. Now, as they arrive in Nauvoo, they are never able to even get a glimpse of Joseph. In other words, no sighting of Joseph. But then the question is, how then could they possibly kidnap him when they never see him in town? And the answer goes to Joseph's wife, Emma. Okay. So Emma, it's now 1842. She has not seen her family for 12 years. So basically, goodbye to Dad, goodbye Mom, goodbye to sisters, to aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. She hasn't seen him for 12 years. So Emma didn't have anybody that had joined the church with her and moved west. Suddenly, at the very same time that the kidnappers are in town, Emma now receives a letter from a nephew. And this letter from the nephew announces to Emma that he has joined the church. And you can imagine, 12 years with none of her family, Joseph's family all coming in. Oh, well, she's pretty excited. Adding to her excitement, she now learns that her sister Elizabeth, since they had lived together back in Harmony, Pennsylvania, Elizabeth is also in Illinois, that she also has moved west, and her sister Elizabeth, through her son, then a nephew of Emma, is now inviting Emma to bring her family about 100 miles above Nauvoo to come and visit. Well, you can imagine, Emma's excited, Joseph's excited, and their conclusion was, let's take a family vacation. Now, I think we can all say family vacations, sometimes the planning is better than the vacation, and other times the vacation just tops any of the planning. Well, okay. Now, you realize they're very excited. And so suddenly you get Joseph, Emma, the children, they're in a wagon. They head up 100 miles above Nauvoo to a little town called Dixon. Okay, who do they leave behind? Okay, bodyguards. You're not going to take bodyguards, family vacation. Who else, in other words, hey, we haven't seen you for 12 years, feed our 40 friends. Okay, you're probably not going to do that. Okay, who else do they leave behind? Okay, like the army, right? This Nauvoo Legion. Well, all right. You can imagine in Nauvoo, the word now spreads pretty fast. Even in my time, there used to be a newspaper in Nauvoo called the Nauvoo Grapevine, which means, a lot of rumors can spread quick. And pretty soon the rumor that Joseph's gone, where is he gone? Well, you know what? Emma's family, it looks like they're coming in the church. People begin to hear, as do the kidnappers. Their conclusion is, we have our, kind of like the moment in the sun, we have our chance. And so kidnappers now head up to Dixon. As they head to Dixon, they're asking people, you see any strangers? Oh, well, we have somebody famous in town. It's the Mormon prophet Joe. Well, where is he staying? And suddenly the kidnappers are now staking out the house. In other words, they're outside, they're looking, they're trying to see, they're waiting for the right moment. And suddenly Joseph Smith now has come out the front door. He's out in the front yard. He's kind of walking around. And the kidnappers, who've been hiding behind a barn, they've got a wagon. It's the two of them. They've got horses. They get on their horses. Horses are now kind of pulling this wagon. And as they now come down the road, they're going fast, but they're waving like they're friends. And so they wave, wave, wave. Joseph, who's very friendly, now stops whatever he was doing. He now waves back. Suddenly, as they now get close, the two men jump off their horse like they're coming to talk to Joseph, but one man takes out a gun and he puts the gun next to Joseph's head. Another man takes out a gun and he puts it to Joseph's throat. They now tell him that he is to get in the wagon. They've got rope and they're now tying him down in the wagon. In other words, we're tying him flat. He's not going to be able to get up. As Joseph's being tied down, Emma now has looked out the window of the farmhouse and suddenly she's screaming. She's rushing out the front door. Her children are following. Here comes Emma's sister, her family, and the kidnappers now are very nervous. They start turning the guns on the children. They start turning the guns towards the women. And you get Joseph now speaking to Emma. And Joseph saying to Emma, get everybody and go back inside. And he's saying to Emma, I'll be all right. Well, it doesn't look like he's going to be all right. Circumstances bad. And so how does he know he'll be all right? And the answer goes like this. In 1840, before the death of his father, Joseph Smith Sr., Joseph had had a priesthood blessing from his dad. And in the blessing, while it was being given, the father had said to him that, in essence, that Joseph would live to fulfill, his mission on the earth. And while he's receiving this blessing, Joseph jumps up in the middle of the blessing, and he says, "Father, Father, is it true? Will I live to complete everything? In other words, I have people all the time after me." And the dad says, "Yes, son, now sit down, let me finish the blessing." Well, okay. So we put Joseph now, he's in the wagon, he's being tied down, and Joseph's now saying to Emma, "I'll be okay, go back inside." In the meantime, Emma's now got everyone back in the farmhouse, and Joseph's kidnapped. And we're going to have him, he's now going off with the two sheriffs, one from Carthage, one from Independence. In the meantime, okay, there was a man who was visiting that farmhouse and actually visiting Joseph and Emma, and his name is William Clayton. William Clayton is a drummer by trade. Back then, you're not going to make a lot of money if you're a drummer by trade. But he also writes poetry, and actually one of the poems he has written has literally gone around the world, and it's called "Come, Come, Ye Saints." Okay? So you would say he's a poet, he's a drummer by trade, but you would not describe him as tough. Okay? So while the women and children are rushing outside to be able to see what's going on, you'd say for William Clayton, he now goes out the back door and he grabs all kinds of horses. He's got like a string of horses, and he actually perhaps proves to be the smarter on this occasion, but he now rides the 100 miles to Nauvoo. He's pretty convinced that he alone can't do anything, but he's also convinced that there are thousands of people in Nauvoo who could do something. Now, as he rides into town, he's going to find that there is a meeting going on, and Hiram Smith, Joseph's brother, is now, presiding at the meeting. Another man is speaking, and suddenly Clayton just comes in, he comes up to the front, he tells Hiram Smith what he's seen. Suddenly Hiram stands up, he says to the man speaking, "You're done." Now, you realize it's an amazing way to end. Where's our closing song? Where's our closing prayer? Hiram Smith then announces, he says, "This meeting is over, but another one will start in 5 minutes." He said, "I want you to hurry to your homes. I want you to come back to the next meeting with all the guns, knives, weapons, bullets, whatever you've got. I'm going to see you back here in 5 minutes." Well, okay. The men now are rushing out. In the meantime, Clayton now spends his time listening to, Hiram Smith spends his time listening to William Clayton. And he hears two men. Joseph's been kidnapped. That's how it looks. It's against his will. Where was it? It's kind of like, fill in the blanks. And within 5 minutes, you pretty much got the same group. You've got over 300 men. But as they walk in, they've got belts. You ever seen Pancho Villa? Okay, they have like belts across their chest, but they all have bullets. So, belts, they have guns, they have knives, and one man even comes in pulling a cannon. And, I've always been grateful the guy wasn't my neighbor. He is prepared for any moment, Okay, so comes in with a cannon, and Hiram Smith now faces the group. He said, "Thank you for coming." He said, "As we begin the meeting, we're beginning with my brother, the prophet Joseph, has just been kidnapped." And he said, "The way I see it, I've learned that 2 men have been seen, but I can't imagine that just 2 men would dare do such a thing." He said, "The way I see it, thousands across the Mississippi River, and that they are now crossing the river, and we will be looking at a complete war here in Nauvoo. In other words, this is the time to board up your houses. This is the time to make those makeshift forts." Remember how we talked how you did it? In other words, we're looking at a total war. He said, "But before we prepare our houses, I want to know, is there any man here who would be willing to give their life to save the life of a prophet of God?"